Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Maham Jyotirgamaya Mrityormam Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maedhi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukham Te Namaham Paha Inityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is freedom, is non-attachment. And the framework is karma yoga. The goal is moksha, that is spiritual freedom. And the means is the practice of non-attachment. And we can begin with a story about the age-old saint and sage Narada. Visualize an old man with a long beard. He's meditating under the banyan tree on the banks of the river Narmada. And north of that river is the holy place of pilgrimage, which is the birthplace of Sri Krishna. And pilgrims wend their way to that tirtha from all parts of South India. And it so happened that on that very day, there were a whole group of gopi girls, that is, cowherd girls, who were on pilgrimage. And they had their baskets filled with milk products of curd and ghee and sweetmeats, cream. But as they came closer to that river Narmada, during the rainy season, the river in full spate, they found themselves in difficulty. What can we do? Well, there's no ferries. Can't wade across. And then they looked there and they saw the sage Narada. Oh, let's go ask him. And they went and prostrated before him, told him of their problem. And he says, yes, well, maybe I can give you help there, but what have you got in those baskets? And, well, they told him all that was in there. He said, I'm very hungry. Could give me something to eat. And so he drank the milk, drank the cream, he ate the payash and the curd. Most of the sweetmeats, he ate them. And then he sat down under the tree and he said, entered into a state of meditation. Then he stood up and he said, oh, river Narmada, if I have eaten nothing today, then let your waters part. No sooner had he said those words than the waters parted. And the gopis, with what they had left in their baskets, they crossed over the river and continued on their journey. Well, Narada, he was a realized master. That is, he had achieved moksha. He had achieved the living freedom of self-knowledge, of the Atman and Brahman. He had the knowledge that in his true nature, although he appeared to have a body and a mind, his true nature was that of infinite formless consciousness like space that pervades everything and it is untouched by anything in the world. And so too, he had discrimination He could discriminate the true from the false, the real from the unreal. And thus he was not at all caught up in the karma of the natural man who acts with attachment and finds himself in bondage. That bondage is due to a lack of discrimination between our true nature, the real, and the apparent man. And we become attached to that apparent persona that we think we are. Let's look a little bit at the word attachment, because it's used in a particular way in yoga psychology. When we think of the word attachment in common parlance in English, usually means something like we say the wife is attached to her husband. That means, that means that the wife loves her husband. Oh, isn't that's how wonderful that is? We do. We want to connect to things. We want to engage ourselves with things. We want to bond to others, and we want to love others. All that's very necessary. But it may so happen that that attachment becomes excessive. That we're not only are we dependent for others, for our safety and our well-being, but we're over-dependent. And it may be that in that situation, the wife who at one time loved her husband, now time has passed. And she finds that things have changed. And now she's abused and beaten, and she's appearing on Oprah one day. And she's telling her whole sad story. And then Oprah asks, well, that sounds terrible. Why do you remain with him? And the wife says, well, because I love him. And yogis, hearing that story, they'll recognize that this is not love. This is attachment. This is entanglement. This is enmeshment. It's almost a sin to call that love. That is the bond, that which began as a bond has now become a bondage. And due to that bondage, maybe living in the self-denial, we find that we've lost that is, we become over-dependent. Not just a healthy dependence, over-dependent. We lost our independence. We've lost our freedom. We've lost our dignity. And we've lost our sense of self-worth. This is what the yogis call attachment. So when you read about this non-attachment, attachment, that's what they mean. This kind of unhealthy state of attachment. Maybe we could call it love without freedom. But that doesn't mean anything. Now we love life. We want to be engaged in the play of life. We want to participate. We want to be connected and be part of the process. And that is, we want to get involved. But yogis tell us that, there's some motivation, there's some good motivation there. But you have to remember that it's good to remember that this world is a sticky place. But Vedanta says, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, all of this world is Brahman. That is, it's all God. Well, what do they mean by world? That's what you got to study Vedanta. The world, that is this world of name and form, this changing dualistic world of Maya, is a sticky place. And if we are going to live, then maybe we need to think a little bit about non-attachment. And we can visualize, for example, a bee. One day it was out flying, it was beautiful, sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the bee went to a rose bush and began to drink the nectar. Then went to a hibiscus flower and drank that nectar, and into some white lilies, and then out of the corner of her eye, maybe she saw a honey pot. It was just left out there. And looked around and thought, why am I growing these flowers? That honey pot. And well, she flew over to the pot, landed right there on the rim, dipped down there, took a taste. Oh, what a beautiful, how sweet it is, the honey. Reached out one of her little arms. No, she's got what? She's got 4 legs, 2 arms. She reached out one of her arms, took up a little bit of honey. It got stuck. Then she tried to tread the honey off that arm, and move from the other, got the other arm stuck. Then moved ahead, tried to move back, move forward. It tripped and fell into the pot. And then her legs were all stuck up. Couldn't fly out. All the wings were all gummed up with honey. World is a sticky place, say. It's a place where we can easily become attached. And, Sri Ramakrishna says this world, in the gospel, he says, this world is like a bramble bush. That is, it's all full of whole bramble, but every single piece of that bush is covered with prickly thorns. He says, no sooner have we disentangled ourselves from one set of thorns than we find ourselves entangled in another. And so it is we live our lives, entangled in the world. Now the yogis looking at this, of course, their ideal is freedom. Freedom with a capital F. That is freedom, which means absolute freedom. Freedom from the body and the mind and from relativity and from dualistic play of the pairs of elements, everything. And so their goal is to become aware of bondage, what binds us, how we become caught, how we become stuck. And all of you remember the famous stories about by Joel Chandler Harris about Brer Rabbit. Brer Rabbit. Well, he lived such a happy-go-lucky life. One day he was walking down the path and he was singing zippity-doo-dah. What a happy day it was. He didn't notice that his two enemies, Brer Fox and Brother Bear. These are his 2 sworn enemies. They're always out to get Brer Rabbit. And they've tried many times, but they failed. But this time they've devised a good trick for him. They've set up in a briar patch. As the road that he's walking down, turns out it passes by a briar patch, all filled with prickly thorns. And in the middle of that patch, they placed a tar baby. And the little tar baby is sitting there. And Brer Rabbit comes walking along. Zippity-doo-dah, he's thinking, what a wonderful day. Oh, hello, good morning, he says. How are you? Fine day, isn't it? No answer. And he stops. He says, well, hello, I said, it's a good, nice day, isn't it? No answer. And he goes, what? What kind of a person is this? Doesn't say anything. So he stopped, walked back, went over to that tar baby. He says, twice I've said, listen, it's unpolite. At least you ought to acknowledge me. I said hello, and then he reached out his arm to shake his hands. Let's at least shake hands. Which he tried. And what did he find? Well, he got caught up in that tar. Tried to pull out, pushed away, pushed and pulled, got tar all over his arm. His other arm, he tried to get rid of that tar. Pretty soon, he's in his arms and legs. He was all caught up. The whole tar baby melted, covering him. And there he sat in the midst of those thorns. While Brer Fox and Brother Bear, they were rolling on the ground. How they enjoying the fix that he was in. He'd become, in the language of the yogis, I remember we're using this word attachment in a particular sense, yoga psychology. Language of the yogis, he'd become attached. He'd become entangled. He'd become enmeshed. He was stuck. He was he had lost his freedom. And so, we can ask ourselves the question, where did this attachment, in this yogic sense, where did this attachment come from? Well, you read in the second chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, we get teaching here of the 5 kleshas, which are vidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha, which means ignorance, ego, attachment, aversion, clinging to life. These are all called kleshas. That means pain-bearing obstructions. And this is a whole analysis in the second chapter of just our question. Where does all of our suffering come from? Our bondage? Well, we have to go way back to the very beginning. And in this, all the religions have the same teaching. It goes back to ignorance. By ignorance here, they mean avidya. That's why it's good for us to have because they don't mean that you're just lacking in book knowledge. What that means is spiritual ignorance. Something has caused us to forget our true nature. Our true self, that is the Atman, is veiled from us. And we have become identified, naturally, with that which is nearest and dearest, closest to us, which is our own body and mind. That is, there's no alternative. And this person who now has no alternative, who just accepts it as reality, because reality is veiled, that's the root cause. That's the ego. The ego is just loss of discrimination. It's loss of the ability to see the difference between our true nature and our false nature. That's where it all starts. Now, the ego itself is a fountain of desire. It makes sense that it would be, because somebody, let's say you take an apple, and somebody just come along, and the beautiful apple is right there. Somebody just comes along with a big knife and just cuts it in half. Now, what would the one half of the apple? The other half disappears. It's covered by darkness. What that one half of the apple, what is it going to think? Well, I'm an apple, but I'm not complete. Something is missing. I need something in my life. I've got to do something. And hence, there arises the next in the progression. See, this is a progression. Avidya, asmita, raga. That is attachment. Dvesha, aversion. That is to say, there naturally arises in ourself, that is our ego, the I am, our sense of who we are, is I want. I desire to have things which I do not have and need. I desire to get rid of those things which cause me pain and suffering and limitation. And I desire also to hold on and cling to those things which are myself and which I know are part of who I am. This is the fundamental law of the ego, of course, is just maintaining your own equilibrium. Maintaining the status quo. Preserving your self-preservation is the first law of nature. Who am I? Well, who are you? Well, you're your self-image. You see yourself in the mirror every day. You can see that's you. You have a body. You have a mind. The person looking there, that's you. And that's self-image that you see. That is what you have. We want to preserve at all costs. And therefore there arise within us desire in three forms. We could call it the three gestures of the ego. And that is grasping, pushing away, and clinging on to. Let's call those the three gestures. The source of our bondage. And now let's look here first at the desire to get what we don't have, what we think that we need. Somebody heard the joke the other day. There's a rumor going around that you need something. You ever hear that? Yeah, I know that rumor. I believe it. Well, we need something. I want something. Say you're taking a walk, and you go walking maybe in, I think of the Spanish village there in San Diego, or center, right by our center there. There's a village, the art is on display. Every day people go strolling through that village. Maybe they see a work of art, just stop. Maybe it's a seascape. And they see that and the surf and the sun, and what a beautiful picture. They stop and contemplate it, almost like with an aesthetic feeling of detachment. What a beautiful picture that is. They're having kind of an aesthetic experience. And they go on their way. And then they get home. Maybe they're sitting in an easy chair there, and they're just kind of looking around their living room, and they think, there's a wall, an empty wall there. That really needs some kind of a picture. A picture, yeah. And then you start, this is the way we think about sense object. This is what it says in the Bhagavad Gita. Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangas teshu bhajayate. That means thinking about the sense object, you get detached. You start you're grasping. And yeah, that picture, that would look pretty good on this wall. I put that one there and put it over there. And by this time, you're thinking you have almost owned it. Yeah, I have to go out the next day, actually buy it. Yeah, now I possess it. And for a while, it gives us happiness. But the yogis look at that, they say, what's wrong with that? That seems to be just the story of my life. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, yogis look at it and say, yeah, well, problems started. There wasn't anything wrong until you were standing there having an aesthetic enjoyment. Nothing wrong with that. But then this little sense of possessiveness began creeping in. You don't even know where it came from. This sense I want, I need. That's called, it begins as threads of desire, attachment. Pretty soon you can't shake it loose. You get kind of stuck in the desire itself. You think, I've got to have that. And in fact, it impels us to action. And right there, yogis would say, we're already suffering. Because desire is just a decider. That means that we're kind of feeling like we're away from our lucky star. We're not, as we want something. That's what desire means. And a feeling of want, a feeling of lack, and of need, that's suffering in the definition of the yogis. So already we're suffering. But not only that, because once we have taken action, we have laid down, as a result of that action, we lay down a samskara in the unconscious. That is, in the subtle body. There remains, as a result of it, not just a memory of what we've done, but there remains a magnetic unit that goes on functioning. That's part of our personality. And that unit will now, when the situation arises again, it's called a habit. All those units will kind of gravitate together, and they'll form habits and vasanas and tendencies. And so we've done this many times. We've fulfilled our desire, in other words. Here again, this is another instance, we fulfilled this desire. We've reinforced that pattern in our psyche of wanting, of needing, of wanting the desire. Not only that, not only does it leave an impression in the psyche, but that impression, one fire lights another. And it's not enough to fulfill one desire. It leads to something else, which may be something else we need. And so this is the story of our lives. You always need something. And if you think that's not true, well, you just sit there in your chair long enough. I don't want to watch TV. I don't want to watch any movies. I don't want to buy anything. No, I'm just going to sit here. No, pretty soon something will pop up in the mind. That's because there's mother desire. That's the mother of the ego. That's the root of the ego. Once upon a time, there was a sannyasin, that is a monk. And he had to he renounced the world. He took sannyasa, that is his sacred orders. He took it right on the bank of the river Ganges. And there was the guru, and they did the homa fire and everything, and he became a monk. And it was all over. The monk said, yes, you know what better place for you to do your spiritual practice than right here. Right here by Mother Ganga. You can bathe in the river. You can have the fire here, and you can go out during the day. Maybe you can beg some little rice and dal from the village nearby, and thus you can live a free life here. So saying, he took leave of his disciple. Well, the disciple, the very next day, he had renounced everything. All that he had left was 2 kaupinas. That means 2 loincloths. One of them he wore. The other one, he would wash in the river. While he was taking his bath, he would hang that on a bush to dry. So there he was taking his bath there in the river Ganga. He came out. What did he see? He saw that his loincloth had been eaten by mice and rats. It was all in tatters. He thought, this is terrible. How can I got to have this. So he thought, you know what I need? I need to have a cat. If I had a cat here, and he'd chase away these rats, and I could live. I could be free. So the very next day, when he went begging in town, he asked, in addition to his ordinary food, bhiksha, he asked for a little cup of earthenware, a little tiny little cup of milk to feed a cat. Brought that back, set that there. Sure enough, there came a cat. Began to eat from that day. And the next day is the same. Got the milk, bring the cat. Everything was fine. And his problem was solved. Except for one day, he went out begging, and one of the householders said, you know, it becomes a little tiresome. You come by here every day, and you're asking for this cup of milk. Why don't you get a cow? You know, then you wouldn't have to bother about that. Yeah, that's an idea, he said. And you know, in India, well, a bunch of sacred cows walking around. So he went back and he thought, yeah. So he got himself, rounded up a cow, brought him back, tied him on a tree. And now his problem was solved because he was able to milk that cow and the milk for the cat, chase away the rats. And but the problem is the cow pretty quickly ate up all the grass around that tree. What could he do? He said the next day he went out, can you give me a little hay? Just a handful of hay. That also became tiresome. They said, why don't you plant some hay? A field is right there. Just plant some. You can grow some field, some wild alfalfa. He thought, that's an idea. And so, in fact, he went there and he cultivated this field. And he grew some hay. And he was feeding his cow. But then one thing led to another. One fire lights another. Because it wasn't enough. He's spending his whole day working on that field of hay. He needed someone to help him. So he got a couple laborers, and they were helping him with the field, and they produced even more hay. They were selling it in the markets, and they had a house. They had to build a bunkhouse for the workers. And, of course, meantime, so they have to live somewhere. The bookkeeper lives somewhere. The sannyasi himself moved in. They built a main house. Then you have to have a wife in order to maintain the house. Like this, the story went, until a year passed. And the guru came by. He said, I'm coming by this way again. And he looked there, came back to the river Ganges. No sight to be seen. Where is that sannyasin that used to live here by the river? Oh, he's moved up into the manor house here. Really? Yeah, he went up there and he knocked on the door. And the door opened. And there's the man. He sees. What does he see? There's the guru. And he'd been living all that time, got in denial. He's forgotten everything. His whole story came rushing back to him. What happened? And he was so shocked. And the guru just stood there and looked at him. He said, what happened to you? You've come a long way from what I saw you a year ago. Yeah. And the man said, looked at sheepishly, he said, yeah, it was all for the sake of a loincloth. That was his explanation. Well, that's the Ramakrishna parable. We see the truth, how true it is, grasping. If a desire lights another fire. Then we got, okay, we're going through these three gestures of the ego. How do you know you have an ego? Well, it has three gestures. One is grasping. Second is pushing away. Pushing away. The ego is like a magnet. We're totally magnetized by all of our past experiences. They're sorted off into two, positive and negative. And that's what we are. We're like walking magnets. We're drawn to certain things and we're pushed away from other things. It's all unconscious. We have likes, we have dislikes. And the likes and the dislikes are in function in the yoga psychology exactly in the same way as desire. Because when you push something, that is when you avoid something, that is this pushing away, it manifests in the form of what? Well, in the form of dislike, of anger, of hate, of fear. A whole range of emotions. These are all negative. These are all manifestations of the desire to push away reality that is not consistent with the ego. That is, with our likes and dislikes. Everything that is not consistent with what is with the programming within. That's a dislike, and that will govern your behavior. So like that, we're conditioned, totally conditioned to act like go through life like a magnet. We don't even know where it comes from. We just look at something. Yeah, I don't like it. Something else, yeah, I like that. We don't even know why we're saying it. And yet that's the way we go through life. So this is pushing away. It has the same karmic effect. Leaves the samskara in the mind. The samskara, that is the magnetic unit, begins to vibrate with others which are consistent with it. It builds habits and our own tendencies. It shapes our character. And so, yeah, that's also actively shaping our character. The desire to get rid of. How many things would make me happy if I could just get rid? And see, once there was in Thailand, there was a monk who lived in one of these wats, they're called. It's like a monastery, but it's adjacent to a temple. It's a monastery. It's right in the middle of town. And maybe there's a city, and there is this temple, and there's the monastery, and this monk lived in the monastery. And every day he would go and he would sit on the veranda of the temple and to meditate. And he found that when he would sit there, that no sooner had he began to withdraw his mind, that he had problems. There was so much noise. There was traffic. And there were people, and there was a hustle and bustle in the city. And maybe most distracting, they turn on the loudspeakers. And so the whole day, you've got music playing. And so he would try to meditate, and he's pushing this music away, trying to push it out of his mind, trying to ignore it, becoming more and more. Of course, anything you resist persists, right? That's psychology. Anything you resist, you give energy to. It becomes more powerful until it builds. It becomes more energetic. And here he is caught in this struggle, this loop of trying to block out this distraction to his meditation. So finally I thought, I got to go and ask my guru. So he went to the abbot of the monastery. They call him Ajahns. He went and asked him, "Sir," he said, "I'm trying here to meditate, but I'm very disturbed by this noise in the marketplace." And he told his story, and the Ajahn looked at him. He said, "It's not the noise that's disturbing you. It is you who are disturbing the noise." That sounds kind of Zen-like. Well, yeah, but think about it. What he's meaning is, of course, the problem is not other people. It's not outside yourself. It's not people, places, things, circumstances, states of affairs. That's not the problem. The problem is within. That's the old Vedantic. What's the old Vedantic analogy? Is the man who had learned the teaching of Advaita Vedanta, that you are a divine immortal soul. You're infinite. You're all-pervading. You're one with the Creator of the whole universe. And the disciple, having heard that teaching, he said, "Yeah." He's talking to his guru. He said, "Yeah, I've understood that." He said, "That's not my problem. My problem is my son doesn't obey me." That's the Vedanta teaching story. In other words, what he thought was the problem was his son. His real problem, the real problem lies within us. It's ourselves. It's your own, what's causing this disturbance. It's our own reaction. And our own reaction is there. We can't help it. We act without even thinking. That is, we're programmed. We're conditioned to act. We're, as they say that The neurons that fire together wire together. That's how we become conditioned. By our past actions, we've conditioned ourselves to react, push away. The second gesture here. Things that we hate, things that we can't stand. Try to avoid. Things that make us angry and that make us annoyed. This is all of our conditioning. What can we do about it? Maybe you could recite the serenity prayer. Lord, give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the wisdom, the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. A good prayer. That's a very wise prayer, but when you think about it, no, wait a minute. The acceptance to accept the things I can't change that person that I really dislike. I can't change it. What can you do? Well, just accept it. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it means is you have to rewire your brain. You have to remake yourself. That's the whole that's the whole process of yoga. How do you do that? Well, that's yoga. In any case, that's our second problem, is it pushing away. All different forms of desire which arise from our attachment to the ego, which robs us of our freedom. We've already lost your freedom. We've forgotten our true nature. A desire now to push things away, to cling, to grasp things, push things away, and then to cling on to things that we already have. That's possessiveness. That's one of the 7 deadly sins, of course, is greed. Non-greediness. What's the opposite of greed? Well, it would be non-greediness. Well, that's kind of a negative concept. We're talking here about non-possessiveness. Once there was a seagull flying around in the air. Jonathan Livingston Seagull. He was so happy. He flew up and the sun was shining and the breeze there on the ocean, but he was hungry. And he looked down there and he saw there the open fish market. What did he see? A bunch of fish laying out in the open air. Spied that, looked down there, swooped down, grabbed a fish in his beak and flew up in the air. He was so happy. He had a big fat fish in his mouth. Meanwhile, all these other poor seagulls, they're on the beach, looking for little crumbs and all that. But then they look up and they see this. Wow, look at that. And they fly up. And so the seagull there, he looks out of his one eye. He sees a bird. Here comes a bird. Looks out of his other eye, sees another bird. And a whole flock, a whole gang of other seagulls are after him. And so he flies up, he flies down, he flies to the north, flies to the south, trying to shake him off, trying to dodge him. Can't do it. Now they're on him, and they're pecking at his wings, pecking at the tail feathers. And then he probably realized, I don't want to, but I gotta let go. I gotta let go of this fish. That's what's causing me all this trouble. So he opened his mouth, let go. Fish fell, all that gang of birds disappeared. They're down in pursuit of that fish. And the seagull flew high up in the sky. He was so relieved that he had been, that was his problem. The problem here was clinging on. Grasping, pushing away, clinging on to those things that we think that will give us happiness. Once there were 2 Buddhist monks who were returning to a monastery during the rainy season, and they came to a creek. And there again, just like the other story, it was rushing there. The creek was rushing over. There's no bridge. There's no nothing. And there was the monk and the guru and the disciple. His name was Tenzan. His disciple, Aikido. They came to the river, the edge of there, that swiftly flowing stream. And what do they see there? That nearby there's a young girl, all dressed up in her rich. She was going to some celebration event. She was wearing her kimono, and she looked so beautiful. And she was all tough, but she couldn't get all across the river. Put her toe in the river. How can I cross? Meanwhile, Aikido, the disciple, he looked in the other direction, because a good monk doesn't look at women, especially dressed in young kimonos. So meanwhile, while he's looking away, what does he see? He sees his own guru, just goes over and says, "Oh, hello, girl. How are you doing? Can I help you?" "Yes, sir." "Can't cross." He scoops her up in his arms. He waded across the river, got to the other side, put her down. Meanwhile, Aikido, he went across the river. And then the two monks, they went on their way, returning to their monastery. But the disciple, his mind was very disturbed. Because his whole, that's his dependent. That's called emotional dependence. His whole guru, how his guru had behaved. That's not the way a monastic is supposed to behave. That is, he didn't fit the model that he had in the mind of what was proper behavior. Meanwhile, Tenzan, the Zen master, he was thinking outside the box. But they went on. Disciple kept trying to stifle this. "I can't say anything." Finally, they're halfway back to the monastery, just blurted out, "Sir, how could you have done such a thing? That's a terrible thing. My mind is very upset, turmoil, having seen this." "Oh," he said, "is that so?" To the guru. "Oh, you're thinking about that girl," he said. I put her down back there. Are you still carrying her?" So, like that. Tenzan, the Zen master, he had detached. He was not attached. He engaged himself in the world, but then he went on his way into freedom. He was living in freedom. He didn't cling on to those things from things that we think that we need. Well, all the religions, all the different forms of yoga teach us that we want to cultivate this virtue of non-attachment. In Jnana Yoga, they call it vairagya. Vairagya means dispassion. Dispassion doesn't mean you hate anything or you are disgusted by it. It just means there's a sugar and there's a sand. The ant comes, he takes the sugar. He just leaves the sand, just leaves it. That's vairagya. He doesn't get, he has not attached. He doesn't get attached to that. In Raja Yoga, it's one of the first prerequisites for the success of meditation. Himsa, Satyasteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, it's called. Non-grasping. It's pretty obvious what it means. We don't need volumes of commentary. Do our own self-analysis. Non-grasping. That's a prerequisite for you to begin to have success in your meditation. I like the analogy there of the old Buddhist analogy of the Buddha mind. The Buddha's mind, the Buddha, of course, lives in freedom. And the Buddha mind is like a mirror. And therefore, if we were to be successful, that we would try to employ our own minds like a mirror. A mirror does not grasp. It does not refuse. It accepts, but it does not keep. That's the mirror mind. And that's not attachment. So that's our subject this morning. talking here about the ideal, which is moksha. All the yogas, all the different practices of yoga have to share the same ideal, spiritual freedom. And what is that freedom? Freedom is the spiritual freedom. And that means the ability just to fully engage ourselves and connect with life, with the people, the places, the things around us. To be the power to be fully attached to the work at hand. The power to put our whole soul on the work at hand. And yet, reserving to ourselves also the power to detach when we should do so.